Chapter 6 Pig and Pepper. For a minute or two, Alice stood looking at the house and wondering what to do next, when suddenly a footman in livery came running out of the wood. She considered him a footman because he was in livery. Otherwise, judging by his face only, she would have called him a fish. He rapped loudly at the door with his knuckles. It was opened by another footman in livery, with a round face and large eyes like a frog. This one, Alice noticed, had powdered hair that curled all over his head. She felt very curious to know what this was all about, and crept a little way out of the wood to listen. The fish footman began by producing from under his arm a great letter, nearly as large as himself, and he handed this over to the other, saying in a solemn tone, "For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet." The frog footman replied, in the same solemn tone, only changing the order of the words a little, "From the Queen, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet." And they both bowed low, and their heads bonked together. Alice laughed so much at this that she had to run back into the wood for fear of their overhearing her, and when she next peeped out, the fish footman was gone, and the other was sitting on the ground near the door, staring stupidly up into the sky. Alice went timidly up to the door, and she knocked. "There's no sort of use in knocking," said the footman, "and that for two reasons. First, because I'm on the same side of the door as you, and secondly, because they're making such a noise inside, no one could possibly hear you." And certainly there was a most extraordinary noise going on within, a constant howling and sneezing, and every now and then a great crash, as if a dish or kettle had been broken to pieces. "Please then, how am I to get in?" asked Alice. "There might be some sense in your knocking," the footman went on, "if we had the door between us. For instance, if you were inside, you might knock, and I could let you out, you know." He was looking up into the sky all the time he was speaking, and this Alice thought decidedly uncivil. "But perhaps he can't help it," she said to herself. "His eyes are so very nearly at the top of his head. But at any rate, he might answer questions. How am I to get in?" she asked again. "Well, I will sit here," the footman remarked, "until tomorrow." At this moment, the door of the house opened, and a large plate came skimming out, straight at the footman's head. It just grazed his nose and broke to pieces against one of the trees behind him. "Or the next day, maybe," the footman continued, exactly as if nothing had happened. "I'm sorry," asked Alice again. "How am I to get in?" "Are you going to get in at all?" asked the footman. "That's the first question, you know." It was no doubt, only Alice did not like to be told so. "It's really dreadful," she muttered to herself, "the way all the creatures argue. It's enough to drive one crazy." The footman seemed to think this a good opportunity for repeating his remark, and he said, "I shall sit here, off and on, every day, every single day." "But what am I to do?" asked Alice. "Anything you like," said the footman. He began to whistle. "Oh, there's no use in talking to you," said Alice desperately. "He's perfectly idiotic." And she opened the door herself and went inside. The door led her into a large kitchen which was full of smoke from one end to the other. The Duchess was sitting on a three-legged stool in the middle, nursing a baby. The cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron which seemed to be full of soup. "There's certainly too much pepper in that soup," said Alice to herself, as well as she could for sneezing. There was certainly too much of it in the air. Even the Duchess sneezed occasionally, and as for the baby, it was sneezing and howling alternately without a moment's pause. The only things in the kitchen that did not sneeze were the cook and a large cat which was sitting on the hearth and grinning from ear to ear. "Please, would you tell me," said Alice, a little timidly, for she was not quite sure whether it was good manners to speak first. "Why does your cat grin like that?" "He is a Cheshire cat," said the Duchess, "and that's why. Pig." She said the last word with such sudden violence that Alice quite jumped, but she saw in another moment that it was addressed towards the baby and not to her, so she took courage from this and went on again. "I didn't know that Cheshire cats always grinned. In fact, I didn't know that cats could grin." "Well, they all can," said the Duchess, "and most of them do." "I've never met any that do," said Alice, as politely as she could manage, though she did feel quite pleased to be in a conversation now. "You don't know much," said the Duchess, "and that's a fact." Alice did not like the tone of this remark, and now it would be as well to introduce some other subject of conversation. While she was trying to fix on one, the cook took the cauldron of soup off the fire and at once set to work throwing everything within her reach at the Duchess and the baby. The fire irons came first, then followed a shower of saucepans, plates, and dishes. The Duchess took no notice of them, even when they hit her, and the baby was howling so much already that it was quite impossible to say whether the blows hurt it or not. "Oh, please, what are you doing?" cried Alice. She jumped up and down in an agony of terror. "Oh, there goes his precious nose," as an unusually large saucepan flew close by and very nearly carried off his nose. "If everybody minded their own business," said the Duchess in a hoarse growl, "the world would go round a deal faster than it does." "Well, that would not be to anyone's advantage," said Alice, who felt very glad to get an opportunity to show off a little knowledge. "Just think of what work it would make within the day and night. You see, the earth takes 24 hours to turn around on its axis." "Talking of axes," said the Duchess, "chop off her head." Alice glanced rather anxiously at the cook to see if she meant to take a hint, but the cook was busy stirring the soup and seemed not to be listening. So she went on again. 24 hours, I think. Or is it 12? "Oh, don't bother me," said the Duchess. "I could never abide figures." And with that she began nursing her child again, singing a sort of lullaby to it as she did, and giving it a violent shake at the end of every line. "Speak roughly to your little boy, and beat him when he sneezes. He only does it to annoy, because he knows it teases." While the Duchess sang the second verse of the song, she kept tossing the poor baby violently up and down, and the little baby howled so that Alice could barely hear the words. "I speak severely to my boy. I beat him nurse it a bit if you like," the Duchess said to Alice. She flung her baby towards Alice. "I must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen anyway." She hurried out of the room. The cook threw a frying pan after her as she went on, but it just missed her. Alice caught the baby with some difficulty, as it was quite strangely shaped, and she held out its arms and legs in all directions. "This baby looks just like a starfish," she thought. The poor little thing was snorting like a steam engine, and it kept doubling itself up and straightening itself out again, so that altogether, for the first minute or two, it was as much as she could do to hold it. As soon as she had made out the proper way of nursing, which was to twist it up into a sort of knot, and then keep tight hold of its right ear and left foot, so as to prevent itself from undoing, she carried it out into the open air. "If I don't take this child away with me," said Alice, "they're sure to kill it in a day or two. Wouldn't it be murder to leave this child behind?" The little baby grunted in reply. Now, said Alice, "don't grunt. That's not at all a proper way of expressing yourself." The baby grunted again, and Alice looked very anxiously into its face to see what was the matter. There could be no doubt that it had a very turned-up nose, a nose much more like a snout than a real nose. Also, its eyes were getting extremely small for a baby, although Alice did not like the look of the thing at all. But perhaps it was only sobbing, she thought, and she looked into its eyes again to see if there were any tears. No tears, she confirmed. "If you're going to turn into a pig, my dear," said Alice seriously, "I'll have nothing more to do with you, so don't do that." The poor little thing sobbed again, or grunted. It was impossible to say which, and they went on for some while in silence. Alice was just beginning to think to herself, "Now what am I to do with this creature when I get home?" when it grunted again, so violently that she looked down into its face with some alarm. This time there could be no mistake about it. It was neither more nor less than a pig, and she felt that it would be quite absurd of her to carry it any further. So she set the little creature down and felt quite relieved to see it trot away quietly into the woods. If it had grown up, she said to herself, it would have made a dreadfully ugly child, but it makes a rather handsome pig, I think. And she began thinking over other ugly children she knew, who might do very well as pigs, and was just saying to herself, if only one knew the right way to change them, when she was a little startled by seeing the Cheshire Cat sitting off on a bough of a tree. The cat only grinned when it saw Alice. It looked good-natured, she thought. Still, it had very long claws and a great many teeth, so she felt it ought to be treated with respect. "Cheshire Puss," she began, rather timidly, as she did not know at all whether it would like this name. However, it only grinned wider. "Come, it's pleased so far," thought Alice, and she went on. "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" The cat replied, "That depends a good deal on where you want to go." "I don't really care where," said Alice. "Then it doesn't really matter which way you choose," said the cat. "So long as I get somewhere," said Alice. "Oh, you're sure to do that," said the cat, "if you only walk long enough." Alice felt that this could not be denied, so she tried another question. What sort of people live around here? In that direction, said the cat, pointing to the right with its paw, lives a hatter. And in that direction, he said, waving his paw to the left, lives a March hare. Visit either you like. They're both mad. But I don't want to go among mad people, said Alice. Oh, you can't really help that, said the cat. We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad. We're quite clearly all mad here. Now, how do you know that I'm mad? Asked Alice. You must be, said the cat, or you wouldn't have come here. Am I right? Alice didn't think that proved anything at all. However, she went on. And how do you know that you're mad? To begin with, said the cat, a dog's not mad. You'll grant me that. I suppose so, said Alice. Well then, the cat went on. You see, a dog growls when it's angry and wags its tail when it's pleased. Now I growl when I'm pleased, and I wag my tail when I'm angry. Therefore, I am mad. Now I call it purring, not growling, said Alice. Fine, call it whatever you like, said the cat. Did you play croquet with the Queen today? I would like it very much, said Alice, but I haven't been invited. You'll see me there, said the cat, and he vanished. Alice was not very much surprised at this. She was getting used to strange things happening. While she was looking at the place where the cat had been, it suddenly reappeared. By the by, said the cat, what happened to the baby? I'd nearly forgotten to ask. The baby turned into a pig, said Alice quietly, just as if it had come back in a natural way. I thought it would, said the cat, and he vanished again. Alice waited a little, half expecting the cat to return, but it did not appear. After a minute or two, she walked on in the direction in which the March hare was said to live. I've seen hatters before, she said to herself. The March hare will be much more interesting. And perhaps, as this is May and not March, perhaps he won't yet be raving mad. At least not so mad as he would be in March. As she said this, she looked up, and there was the cat again, sitting on a branch of a tree. Hey now, said the cat, did you say pig or fig? I said pig, replied Alice, and I wish you wouldn't keep appearing and vanishing so suddenly. You're making me quite scared. All right, said the cat, and this time it vanished, very slowly, beginning with the end of his tail and ending with his grin, which remained for some time after the rest of it had gone. Well, said Alice, I've often seen a cat without a grin, but a grin without a cat. That's the most curious thing I've ever seen in my life. She had not gone much further before she came in sight of the house of the March hare. She thought it must be the right house, because the chimneys were shaped like ears, and the roof was thatched with fur. It was so large a house that she did not like to go near until she had nibbled some of the left-handed bit of mushroom. This raised her to about 2 feet high. although even then she walked up towards it rather timidly, saying to herself, "I suppose it should be raving mad after all. I almost wish I'd gone to see the Hatter instead."